Thank you very much, Ambassador. And good morning to everyone, Excellencies all, the Assistant Secretary General. It's good to be back here in this hall. I guess this is the second time this year. And I'm happy you started off talking about culture because we have our Director of Culture sitting at the back. I'm sure she'd be very heartened by that. And part of my mission here today is actually to try and bring Junkanoo to Broadway. So we're going to see a theater after we leave here today to try and move that project along. So you have a true believer in me. But it is a special honor, as I said, to join you all today. And I would like to pay tribute to those who were my predecessors in this job. This is the third time for me in this job since my first appointment in 2002. And so I'd just like to pay tribute to them who were at this podium before me. Sir Lyndon Pindling, who's the founder of our country. Mr. Paul Adderley, if I called him sir, he would turn in his grave. Sir Clement Maynard, Sir Charles Carter, Dame Janet Bostwick, Sir Orville Turnquest, Mr. Brent Simonet, Mr. Darren Henfield, who is my immediate predecessor, and of course myself. So there have been 9 of us all together who served since joining the OAS. And it's a pleasure and honor to be here in the House of Americas to celebrate Pan American Day and Week, and more broadly, the enduring Pan-American spirit that is characterized by a shared yearning among the newly sovereign former colonies of the hemisphere for true liberty and equality, and for diplomatic, economic, social, and political cooperation to build a new and better Americas. It is a spirit that was first perhaps animated by the Haitian and American revolutions of the late 18th centuries, driven by the just cause of the pursuit of freedom from the tyranny of a colonizing foreign minority, and for realization of liberty, equality, and socio-political inclusion for all citizens. And I pause here to recognize the immense debt that there is still owed to the Haitian people, who led the largest and most successful slave revolt that founded for the first time a new society to be ruled by a black majority that would be free of slavery, but who also, at proverbial gunpoint, were forced to repay former French slaveholders for their loss of free labor, which hobbled the nascent independent country's capacity to develop well into the mid-20th century. Unlike the Haitian people know all too well, progress in the Americas has not been linear. Over the past few centuries, the hemisphere has faced critical setbacks due to wars, transnational crime, the scourge of racism, and other human rights atrocities, and the rise of authoritarianism. However, the indomitable spirit of Pan-Americanism has proved to be one characterized by persistence and striving towards, as the OAS Charter prescribes, an historic mission to offer to man a liberty, and that must include women, and a favorable environment for the development of his or her personality and the realization of his or her just aspirations. It is a legacy that drove Simon Bolivar on his pursuit of the freedom of the New World with the convening of the Congress of Panama, and this legacy runs like an unbroken thread through the series of inter-American conferences convened over the 19th and 20th centuries that built the tenets of the inter-American system and led to the creation of the International Union of the American Republics here in Washington, D.C., which we celebrate today as the precursor to this august organization. Ours is a hemisphere with a uniquely interwoven history and culture. By and large, we all share a heritage informed by African, indigenous, and Western colonial influences. This shared history and culture serves as the foundation for the credo of Pan-Americanism, which seeks to preserve and expand hemispheric solidarity within the context of the notion of good neighborliness and pacific settlement of disputes. Over time, the tenets of Pan-Americanism have expanded to incorporate respect for the rule of law and fundamental human rights, and the primacy of representative democracy as a form for structuring political engagement in our societies. For many former colonies of the hemisphere, we've come a long way from the state-sanctioned dehumanization of Black and Indigenous bodies that was the order of the day just a few generations ago. Unlike the contagious influence of liberation movements that first sparked Pan-American ideals in the 18th century, the social justice movements of the 20th century spurred a wave of newly independent CARICOM countries seeking membership in the OAS, which has added new dimensions to Pan-Americanism and to the complexion of the inter-American system. Here, work still remains to ensure fuller integration of newer states, like my country, the Bahamas, into the OAS and other bodies of the inter-American system. With its 4 working languages and the required dual language proficiency, attention may be paid to implement language training, especially for non-Spanish speaking member states, to allow for an OAS that better represents the entire region. I identify with this because I've sat around dinners, social functions, and I'm the only one that doesn't speak Spanish. And I regret having not taken Spanish classes when I was in high school. I chose Latin instead. That was very useful. This responsibility, though, of multilingualism should be an objective of the OAS, and I include also French and Dutch, particularly since about 30% of the Bahamian population speaks Creole as a first language. Work remains then to better reflect CARICOM priorities and people within the inter-American institutions. A broader, more representative Pan-Americanism must also encompass a commitment to collaboration for sustainable development and building economic and environmental resilience, and ensuring full inclusion and equality for persons of African descent and indigenous persons within our societies. Now, over the past century, however, there have been real pioneering achievements as a result of the collective work of developing and expanding the inter-American system, including the creation of the Pan American Health Organization, which predated the World Health Organization by more than 40 years, and its successes with fostering technical cooperation to eliminate polio and smallpox in the Americas, cutting infant mortality, and most recently the coordination of COVID vaccine distribution. The founding of the Inter-American Economic and Social Council, and the Inter-American Council for Education, Science, and Culture, more than 75 years ago, and the subsequent establishment of the IDB as the first regional multinational development bank. The formation of the Inter-American Commission of Women, the world's first intergovernmental agency established almost a century ago to ensure the recognition of women's human rights. The development of the Inter-American Human Rights System, including the Inter-American Juridical Committee, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, the American Declaration of the Rights and Duties of Man, which is the world's first general international human rights instrument, and which included novel concepts such as the right to education, the right to social security, the right to leisure, right to protection of mothers and children, the right to culture, and the right to the inviolability of the home. And then there's the landmark Inter-American Treaty of Reciprocal Assistance for collective regional defenses. And through the defining characteristics of the OAS as a group of states committed to the indispensability of representative democracy as enshrined in the OAS Charter, and the subsequent adoption of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, which all of our countries are bound to, and which asserts that the peoples of the Americas have a right to democracy and their governments have an obligation to promote and defend it. Ours, therefore, is a hemisphere that leads and that has demonstrated time and again a capacity to rise to the moment and to collaborate on innovative and ambitious solutions for shared challenges. Ours also is a hemisphere rich in culture and diversity, from the syncopation of rap and jazz and blues in the north to the joyful rhythms of reggae and junkanoo and soca in the Caribbean, and the vibrancy of salsa, samba, and tango in the south. Our music, our food, our art, and our beautiful climes comprise a lavish tapestry which serves as the envy of the world. And it is the OAS and the tools of the inter-American system that serve as the indispensable connective tissue, facilitating our modern efforts to collaborate on building the Americas we want and on fully leveraging the dynamism of the hemisphere. It is not all sunny in the Americas, of course. Nothing in life is perfect. Ours is also a hemisphere where deep-rooted structural challenges remain. We are among the most unequal and most violent parts of the world, and there are increasingly worrying signs of democratic backsliding and undermining of basic human rights and equality in many of our countries. We continue to contend with old challenges such as the risk of conflict from regional border disputes. And here I reiterate our hemisphere's professed commitment to respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, the rule of law, and the virtue of preserving the hemisphere as a zone of peace. We also must confront new challenges such as the existential risk of climate change and natural disasters, and the threat to democracy from clandestine disinformation campaigns and digital illiteracy. Our brothers and sisters in Haiti require urgent support to stabilize and reconstruct Haiti into a country that they deserve. And if we look towards our inter-American institutions, they too require renewal in order to ensure that they are fit for purpose for the modern Americas. Despite the routine profession of our appreciation for the OAS, our talk as member states has not often matched our actions as we continue to underfinance the OAS, particularly in relation to the proliferation of mandates that we generate for it. Many of our countries have adopted a laissez-faire approach to meeting our financial obligations as member states in a timely and fulsome fashion. As a result, the capacity of the OAS in recent years to deliver on mandates has been constrained, and in some cases has been severely compromised. We see this, for example, in the decline in regular financing afforded to OAS scholarships, which has historically been a flagship OAS program. This needs to change. In the face of the emerging challenges facing the Americas, the OAS and other institutions within the inter-American system continue to face a question of relevancy and impact, driven by the key metric of whether OAS projects and projects and programs are being felt by the men and women on the ground in our countries. And while it will be important to lean into doing work that leverages the comparative advantages of the OAS and the other tools of the inter-American system, if our efforts are to have the greatest impact, we cannot reflexively limit our imagination or the ambition of our aspirations. Let us therefore recommit ourselves to the work to craft an OAS and an inter-American system that reflects the dynamism of the hemisphere and that builds on the legacy and ambition of those that came before us. Providence would have it that in 1983, 1 year after gaining membership of this organization, the Bahamas for the first time chaired the Permanent Council and led, as we are today, by a protocolary session of the Permanent Council to celebrate Pan American Day. In that address, Ambassador Reg Wood, the presiding ambassador of the Bahamas to the United States of America and permanent representative to the OAS, spoke of a reality that rings true today. And he stated, and I quote, "Let me close these brief remarks by appealing to all of you today to take a moment on Pan American Day to reflect and ponder the fate of our organization, and more than our organization, the Secretariat as an institution, the fate of all peoples of our hemisphere as well. Great challenges are before us all, and we must remember the heavy responsibility we bear for preserving peace, freedom, and justice. We must not let this day pass lightly as just another ceremony. I end the quote. Let us dare to dream of an Americas that can and should lead the world in decarbonization. I challenge this body to build on the commitments emanating from the Inter-American Meeting of Ministers of Sustainable Development held in the Bahamas last October, to facilitate concrete actions which support every member state's efforts towards attaining net zero economies, which preserve biodiversity and environmental heritage for future generations. Climate change requires an all-hands-on-deck approach, and engagement on climate action is not the sole domain of any one international organization. Among other objectives, the OAS can, for example, concretely make a difference through developing a robust climate-smart skills program that will build capacity and train thousands of youth from across the Americas in the green skills for the future of work. And given the hemisphere contains many of the most environmentally vulnerable nations on Earth, the Americas also can and should lead the world in the development of a flexible and responsive mechanism for coordination and direction of hemispheric and recovery support in the wake of disasters and natural emergencies. The Americas can and should lead the world in provision of support for the stabilization and revitalization of Haiti, while ensuring our efforts are informed by the will of the Haitian people. Talking about solidarity is important, but insufficient. The OAS can play a greater role in coordinating humanitarian, security, and democratic efforts, and in executing projects and programs that can bring much-needed help and hope to our brothers and sisters in Haiti. The Americas can and should lead the world on scaling effective cooperation for dismantling transnational trafficking in guns, people, and drugs that continues to endanger and destabilize our communities, and we must lead on reforming the global approach to the war on drugs, so that it is no longer a war on our citizens, but a war on organized crime. Returning to the very roots of the Inter-American cooperation, the Americas can and should prioritize promotion of enhanced commercial and trade ties between the countries of the hemisphere and support efforts of countries in the region to improve trade facilitation and connectivity. The Americas can and should lead the world on reform of the international financial architecture, including official development aid, development financing, given the inherent vulnerabilities, high indebtedness, strident inequality, and threat of financial inclusion that continues to plague most of the countries in the hemisphere, particularly small island developing states like the Bahamas. And as a hemisphere still gripped by the legacies of the original sins of slavery, racial segregation, and native genocide, the Americas can and should lead the world on advocacy for reparative justice for persons of Afro descent, indigenous persons, and other vulnerable groups. So this is the America that I believe our citizens want. It is one that honors the legacy, struggle, and vision of our forebears. The work of building the Americas continues, but it is a work that I'm convinced we can all accomplish together. Thank you.